So now let's talk about this abstracting things and making some things generic. Now there are wide variety of ways to do this type of thing. So all this stuff is very specific to this API call, except for this. So what I use for the networking service, fetch API response. This is very generic. And as long as I get a URL, I can have other functions create the URL for the for the request. But this can work with any URL for whatever request and return the appropriate data always. So this component can be used over and over again. Another aspect that can be used over and over again is the where's my helper at? The JSON parser. Okay. It accepts it's of type generic, and you can pass to it any model. So I could pass, like when I did use it, for example, when I did use it in the main view model parser. Let me see. Yeah. Parser. Right, there we go. You know, in order to parse an acronym object, I pass it as a parameter to let the generic know that this is a type acronym object. You know, but if it called for it, I could parse any other type of object. Okay. So again, this parser.parse data is reusable, you know, and I can use it for other object models, right? However, the rest of it is very specific to the parser. I mean, it's very specific to getting this data, this list. So fetch list of strings from data is very specific to this. Okay, fetch API data key, you know, again, or API data, I'm sorry. Again, gets the specific data, doesn't a specific call, right? And yeah. Okay, fetches the string. Right. Okay, results. Let me just make sure. Fetch API data. Networking service, absolutely. Okay. And list of strings from data is very unique, right? Because this gets the strings. But as far as, again, the parser and the actual networking, those are very generic. And so, again, we're talking about reusable code, not repeating code. So if I had to do another API call response, I would reuse this, go back and use this exact same thing, and I can go back and use the parser to parse data. So we have that clear. Now let's go ahead and implement our some more aspects of this with our object model. So go to our main view model. All of this is working. We've tested it and we've written this to the screen. Okay. So now let us go back to our main view controller. Okay. We have this right here. So now what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of this. Okay. We don't need this anymore. Okay. Well, actually, going to comment that out. And now you should have problems with this as well, right? This isn't in scope. And this isn't in scope, right? Now there's another component. Now we don't want to have an array. We're not going to replace this array with another one. That's not how you pass data to the table view or any other control, right? By having the array in the view controller. Again, that's what it means when we say we want our view controller to be dumb. There's no data being here, right? What we're going to do is we're going to do this. So we already have our UI table view delegate and our table view data source. And those, of course, we know those methods are working. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create another function. Okay. We'll say extension main view controller. And this is going to be for what they call data binding. Okay. By the way, I'm going to do another video where we do data binding, but with Combine. But this is just giving you the basic principles of MVVM. This is the real principles of MVVM. Okay, so let's go. Private func set up bindings. Okay, that's what this is going to be. Private func setup bindings, right? Now, in our view model, we have a property, right? We have a property called list, right? And it is of type observable object. We discussed observable object earlier, right? This is our observable object. We want to use this method so that, again, whenever there's a change in the observable object, it is updated, right? And it will cause an updating of controls in the view controller. And to give you an idea, so you'll know what I'm talking about, right? So I'm going to say, look, view model, right? Dot list dot value. Okay, well, not value, dot list dot bind. That's the method that we want. Return key. I'm going to call this list, right? And of course, you're creating a strong reference. So now let me say something else. What we need to do is we need to refresh our table view because we're dealing with UIKit, not Swift UI. So I'm going to say dispatch queue dot main dot async. And I'm sorry that I haven't gotten into asynchronous queues and yeah, asynchronous functionality and the precedence, I guess, main thread versus background thread versus user interactive versus user initiated. And yeah, so but we're gonna talk about threading and dispatch queue and stuff like that in another lesson. But for now, we need to put any changes to something that is in the UI on the main thread. And so we're updating the table view. This is how you put the table view on the main thread. Dispatch queue.main.async. Self dot table view dot reload data. Okay, so now that we have this, there's a problem. We have a problem. And our problem is that, well, let's not even talk about that problem yet. Let's get it working and we'll come back to this problem. Okay, so now what we want to do, we need to go ahead and get the data, from list onto the cell, right? Or in the table view. Cell dot text label. So you see how that's grayed out because it's about to be deprecated, meaning Apple is about to remove that. Okay, so let's see. I have this view model dot list dot value index path dot row. And that's all we need for this. And now we have this right here, return view model dot list dot value dot count. And that should always do it. And because we did the way we did, we made our default value, sorry, go back to the view model. It's always an empty array. It is always 0, so we don't have to unwrap anything. Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's do this. All right, and then I'm going to say DL. And of course, but we have a problem. And let's see where this problem is. Okay, and I guess the simple answer to that question is this needs to be called automatically as soon as you load. So setup bindings should be in view did load right here. Set up bindings. And now I have a listener. I have this listening for any change in the view model. So, and what causes changes to the view model? Me entering something into the text field, right? And that text field, makes changes to the view model, right? It makes changes to the view model. And let me show you. This is where the view model gets altered right here. Okay. So let's go back here and we'll run this again. Okay. And we'll say DL. And there we go. Long list. Let's say, okay, LO. Okay, there we go. And so this is basic MVVM. Again, you're abstracting much of the data, if not all, from the view controller, and you are putting it into a view model, and the view model is what returns the data. I want this controller to be dumb. Look how little code is in the view controller, right? This addresses another issue, which is called, they refer to it as bloated view controllers, right? Means there's so much business logic, aka if else statements and functionality going on in the view controller that it's hard to read and it's hard to maintain. So all of that is abstracted to the view model, We don't have an array in here. Never put an array in your view controller. Don't do that. That's bad practice. You might not have learned that at boot camp, but that is the case. Okay. And another thing I want you guys to understand. Oh, by the way, let's go ahead and clear this out. This right here is what you would call a strong reference. You have a closure, and this is being used here. Now, we aren't calling it, right? But in this closure, there's a strong reference to table view and list. We want to make this weak, especially if we use list to do anything else, right? Right now, we aren't really using it to do anything. So this is maybe a bad use of this, right? But let's go ahead and you have to do it like this. So there's a weak reference. What you have to say is there's a strong reference so far. You have to make the reference to this class weak. Then to this class, I'm meaning main view controller, right? So you declare it as weak. Weak self, right? As a result, however, what is happening? Yes, this needs to be unwrapped, right? And you can do it like this, right? This basically says this will break or this will not crash if your reference to this class no longer exists, okay? Or the reference to this, right? The connection between the class main view controller and table view no longer exists, right? So let's go ahead and run it to make sure. Okay, OL. And of course it's working. There's another way you could do this. Of course, you could do this with the bang operator, as a lot of people will call it. However, if something happens and you have to reference this and there's no view controller, that's a whole nother lesson. This will crash. If this is nil, itself is ever nil for any reason, your app will terminate. There's a safe way to go about this, and that is you can say, you can call this strong self. You can unwrap it using a guard statement or an if let statement. Guard let strong. And if you've worked any place where there are more senior developers, you may have seen this. Else return, right? And you can take this C. Okay, so if the reference to this class exists, then do this. Otherwise, don't do none of it, right? That will avoid a crash and it will allow this to be a weak reference so you don't have memory leak issues, okay? And let's run it. Right, and so I am going to do a video on memory leaks and strong self. I may have already done that, actually. But check the library. I'm pretty sure I have if you need a refresher on it, but that's how that works. And so another thing I just want to tell you guys is there are other ways of getting back the data outside of using closure API call. And I'm going to cover that in a bit with Combine, futures and promises. So that's it for now. On to the next.